Episode 3, A Gamble on the Tip of the Tongue. The black vine, writhing like a living serpent, shot toward Ryan's throat. Survival instinct overtook reason. Ryan threw himself to the side, rolling across the ground. It was a cowardly but practical maneuver, honed in the back alleys of Belmore, while dodging the knives and bottles of angry creditors. With a sharp whoosh, the vine sliced through the empty air, where he had been standing just a moment before. "Ryan, move!" Lauren's desperate cry echoed from the tree above, but Ryan had no time to spare for him. As soon as he dodged the first attack, dozens of shadows began to crawl out from the darkness surrounding the clearing. They were neither human nor beast. Their bodies were formed of twisted branches, with rotting leaves clinging to them like hair, and an eerie yellow light glowed from within moss-covered crevices. They were small, but their numbers were overwhelming. Twiglings. Ryan recalled a song he had heard long ago from a bard in some tavern. In the song, the appearance of just one or two was enough to send an entire village into a panic. Now, there were easily several dozen of them before his eyes, with a chorus of sickening creaks and groans, like the sound of dry branches twisting. The twiglings closed their circle around him. "I wonder if that clever tongue of yours can stop the teeth of these hungry children." The woman, no, the witch of the woods, said with a cold sneer. She was no longer acting the part of a fragile victim. A faint green light emanated from her body, and new vines sprouted from the earth at her feet, coiling around her like serpents. She seemed to be the very heart and will of the forest itself. The situation was desperate. All Ryan had was a single dagger. Against this horde, it would be no more effective than a pinprick. His mind began to race. Every gong required a decisive move to turn the tables. If he couldn't win with force, he had to strike at a weakness. He had to exploit his opponent's desire, fear, or arrogance. Just then, a massive shadow leaped from the tree. It was born. Without his armor, he threw himself from a height of nearly 60 feet, aiming directly for the witch. His steel-hard body was a living weapon. "You vile thing, face my judgment." Warren's roar echoed through the forest. His plan was simple: to crush the witch under his immense weight. It was reckless, but it was Boren's way. The witch, however, didn't even deign to scoff. She simply raised a hand with an air of indifference. Dozens of vines shot up from the ground, forming a great net in the air that caught Boren's falling body perfectly. With a dull thud, Boren landed on the net of vines. The impact was absorbed, but the vines immediately wrapped around his limbs and torso, constricting him. In an instant, he was like a moth caught in a giant spider's web. You filth!" Boren struggled, but the vines tightened around him, tougher and more unyielding than steel. For the first time, a note of bewilderment and pain crept into his booming voice. Now, Ryan was truly on his own. He desperately scanned his surroundings. The witch, the vines, a horde of twiglings, and the petal flower glowing alone at the top of the tree. Suddenly, a spark ignited in Ryan's mind. Why had the witch placed the flower in such a conspicuous spot? To show off her power? Or was it because the flower itself was incredibly important to her? The words from the signpost echoed in his memory. "In the shadow of the wood, the real treasure sleeps." Perhaps the real treasure wasn't gold, but that very flower. Ryan decided to make a gamble. His life had always been a high-stakes game of audacious bluffs and bold lies, and he had never lost. Just seconds lunged, he dropped his dagger to the ground with a soft thud. Then, he raised both his hands in a gesture of surrender. Wait, just wait. Ryan's sudden action made not only the witch, but also the advancing Twickeling's pause in confusion. Are you begging for your life now? It's too late, the witch said coldly. Begging? Hardly. Ryan struggled to flash a confident smile. His heart was pounding like a drum, but he kept his voice as calm and arrogant as he could. I am here to offer you a deal, mistress of the wood. A deal? The witch's eyebrow rose slightly. For the first time, a flicker of interest crossed her face. Yes, a deal. You seem to be having quite a bit of trouble with that moon petal up there. At Ryan's words, the witch's expression momentarily hardened. It was a minuscule change, but Ryan didn't miss it. It was the sign that the first step of his gamble had landed perfectly. What are you talking about? It's obvious just by looking. That flower, it's dying, isn't it? Ryan gestured with his head toward the top of the tree. Its light is getting weaker. It probably won't last another month. And when that flower withers completely, this beautiful forest of yours will wither along with it. Am I wrong? Ryan was bluffing, relying purely on his intuition and observation. But his voice was filled with the conviction of someone who knew everything. The witch's response was silence, a silence that was as good as an admission. Ryan sensed he had the upper hand and pressed on. I am not the simple bard you think I am. He puffed out his chest. My true identity is that of an arcane botanist from the Royal Negus Society. I am a specialist, dispatched on a special mission to save that dying moon petal. It was a plausible-sounding title he had once used to swindle a librarian at the Mages Guild. He watched the witch's reaction as he continued to weave his story. This oafish knight beside me is merely a bodyguard for my mission. We didn't come here to fight you. On the contrary, we came to help you. If you kill us, the only way to save that flower will be lost forever. Along with your forest, of course. The witch stared at Ryan for a long moment, her gaze piercing him as if trying to see into his soul. Her deep green eyes wavered between suspicion and hope. She had lived in this forest for centuries, but she was not accustomed to the cunning lies of the outside world. How can I believe you? She finally asked. Give me a chance to prove it. Ryan replied as if he had been waiting for the question. Take me to that flower. I will diagnose its condition and prescribe a remedy. If I'm lying, it won't be too late to throw me to your children for dinner then, will it? Bound in vines, Lauren watched this entire scene with wide eyes. Arcane botanist. Ryan, what in the world is he talking about? But seeing Ryan's earnest expression, he decided to keep his mouth shut. Whatever Ryan's plan was, it was their only shot. The witch was lost in thought. Ryan's words were incredibly bold and far-fetched, but on the other hand, they made a certain kind of sense. It was true that the moon petal was dying, and she had tried every method she knew to revive it, all to no avail. A sliver of hope that this outsider might actually have a solution began to sway her resolve. Very well, the witch finally decided. I will test whether that clever tongue of yours speaks the truth, or if this is merely a desperate attempt to delay your death. At her gesture, the twigglings that had surrounded Ryan melted back into the shadows. A massive vine descended before Ryan, spreading itself wide as if to offer him a ride. Get on, botanist. The witch's voice was still laced with sharp thorns. If I find that you have deceived me, your bones will serve as fertilizer in the deepest part of this forest. Ryan swallowed hard and stepped onto the vine. His gamble had succeeded for now, but the real challenge was just beginning. His knowledge of botany was limited to telling the difference between poisonous herbs and hallucinogenic mushrooms. Now, he had to save a dying magical flower with his own life on the line.